They always introduced her as, just the babysitter. Not nanny, not caregiver, not even Elise, her name. Just a vague title, said lightly with a practiced smile, like she'd wandered in from Craigslist and stuck around for convenience. It didn't matter that she'd been in their home longer than most of the furniture. It didn't matter that she'd raised their daughter through every cold, tantrum, birthday, and nightmare for the last 8 years. What mattered was that she didn't belong. And if you've ever been made to feel invisible in a room you built with your own hands, don't scroll, stay with this story. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from, because you deserve to be seen. Let us know where in the world you're watching from: US, Canada, UK, South Africa. Before the silence of that moment, the one where the room waited for someone to answer, there was a beginning. Her name was Elise Monroe. She was 27 when she moved into the Carmichaels' home. A recent graduate nurse with too much student debt, a mother on dialysis, and a heart too soft for her own good. She saw the job posting while scrolling through a nursing forum one sleepless night: live-in nanny needed for 3-year-old girl. Competitive pay. Discretion a must. It sounded both hopeful and clinical. She had called the number that morning, and by Friday, she stood at the gates of the Carmichael estate, gripping the straps of her overnight bag and whispering to herself not to fidget. Jane Carmichael opened the door. Slim, angular, blonde in that expensive, unbothered way, Jane smiled with teeth and none of it touched her eyes. Behind her stood Robert, towering in a stiff suit despite the weekend. He didn't say much. Just offered a nod and a handshake like Elise was interviewing to hold a clipboard, not raise their child. She's just a little shy, Jane said, nudging Ava gently from behind her thigh. The child clung to her mother's hem, a thumb in her mouth, curls tied into a frizzy ponytail that had mostly come undone. Elise knelt down, voice light but warm. "Hey, sweetheart. I'm Elise. I like cartoons, grilled cheese sandwiches, and coloring outside the lines. What about you?" Ava peeked out. "Do you like horses?" she asked softly. Elise grinned. "Love them. Especially the ones with glitter on their hooves." Ava blinked. Then smiled, just a little. Her bedroom was downstairs, near the laundry room. Not in the guest wing where Jane's friends stayed, not near Ava's room either. Elise didn't ask questions. She was grateful for the opportunity. The salary was more than she could earn in a hospital back home, and her mother's medication bills weren't going to pay themselves. The house itself was eerily quiet most of the time. The kind of quiet that felt curated, like background noise had been professionally removed. Ava's cries were muffled through the walls during her nightmares. Jane rarely lifted her voice. Robert spent more time in conference calls than in the living room. Elise quickly learned the rhythm of the household, when to speak, when to disappear. In those early weeks, Elise didn't sit at the table. Meals were served, and she often took her plate to the patio or ate standing in the kitchen. No one told her to. It was just understood. The bond between Ava and Elise grew faster than anyone expected. Elise learned that Ava hated cucumbers and loved bedtime stories about space. That she liked her shoes to be color-matching but hated wearing socks. That she hummed when nervous and sometimes asked questions too big for her age, like, if a mommy doesn't like hugs, is it bad to want one? Elise never answered too quickly. She'd wait, watch Ava's face, and then say things like, "You're allowed to want love." And sometimes grown-ups forget how to give it. By the 3rd month, Ava was crawling into her lap during movie nights, asking Elise to read her bedtime stories even when Jane was home. She started calling her Lissy when no one was around. Elise never corrected her. But one day, Jane overheard. "Lissy?" she asked, lips tight. Ava nodded. "She's mine," she said with a proud little grin. Jane's face faltered. "Darling, she works here. She's not yours." And Elise, standing behind Ava, only smiled. She knew her place. Or thought she did. The Carmichaels were polished in public, aloof in private. They threw fundraisers, holiday galas, and charity luncheons, but in the quiet hours of the evening, Elise was the one who braided Ava's hair, taught her to tie her shoes, and held her through thunderstorms. Once, after a black tie event, Jane came home late. Elise helped her out of her heels at the door. Jane, tipsy, slumped into the armchair and looked at her sideways. "You're good with her," she said. Elise smiled, thinking it was a compliment. "It's almost maternal," Jane added, voice slightly slurred. "Of course, it's different when it's your own." The words burned on the way down. Elise nodded and said nothing. That night, she cried into her pillow, silently, so Ava wouldn't hear through the wall. Over time, the family began referring to Elise not by name, but by function. The sitter. The help. The extra hand. At Ava's 5th birthday, Elise planned the entire party, theme, decorations, cake, activities. Jane posted the photos on Instagram, captioned, "Couldn't have done it without our amazing planner." Not Elise. Not her. Just planner. Still, she stayed. Because Ava needed her. Because every time that little girl looked at her like the sun rose from her pockets, Elise forgot the ache of being invisible. But invisibility, when left unchecked, starts to rot. And Elise was beginning to smell the mold beneath the smiles. One autumn morning, Ava came into her room with a crayon drawing. "It's our family," she said. There were 4 figures. Jane, Robert, Ava, and Elise. Elise smiled. "And who's this?" she asked, pointing to herself. "You," Ava said. "You're my Lissy. You make me feel safe." Elise felt something loosen in her chest. And something else tighten. Because even children could recognize the difference between love given and love denied. For years, Elise kept a mental list of everything she'd missed: birthdays with her mother, funerals she couldn't attend, weddings where she sent gifts but not RSVPs. There was always some reason she couldn't go. Ava had a fever. Jane needed help preparing for a gala. Robert had a sudden trip, and someone had to stay home with the child. Always someone. Always something. And always Elise, in the background, rearranging her life around people who never once asked what she needed. She told herself it was worth it. That Ava's laugh made the sacrifices feel smaller. That hearing the girl squeal her name after daycare, arms outstretched and covered in finger paint, somehow made up for the ache in her spine and the growing silence from her own life. But there came a day when even the softest love begins to harden. It started small. Jane began correcting her more often in front of Ava. "Don't give her juice before dinner, Elise." Or, "We don't do TV until after reading time, remember?" As if Elise hadn't been the one who created those routines in the first place. Then came the changes in tone. "We need to be more professional. This is still a job, Elise." Robert, once too busy to speak, began noticing everything. A spot on the window. A missed button on Ava's coat. "You used to be sharper," he muttered once, shaking his head. Still, Elise stayed. Because Ava would whisper, "Lissy, don't go," when Elise mentioned her day off. Because Ava drew pictures of Elise holding a sword and wearing a crown, calling her queen of the house. Because Elise loved her like a daughter. And yet, she wasn't family. Not really. Not when it counted. On Ava's 6th birthday, the Carmichaels threw a party so large, the catering team parked in the garden. Elise organized everything behind the scenes. Made sure Ava's dress was pressed. That her glittery shoes didn't pinch. That her favorite cake, strawberry with cream cheese frosting, had extra sprinkles just the way she liked it. When guests arrived, Elise retreated to the hallway. She stood behind the staircase, watching Ava twirl to music with her classmates. A woman approached Jane. "Oh, is that your nanny?" she asked, gesturing toward Elise. Jane smiled too brightly. She helps us out. She's more of a live-in type. Ava's very attached. Elise heard every word. Not her name. Not family. Just attached. In the years that followed, Elise aged in ways she couldn't see until she looked in the mirror. Her hair had more gray strands. Her hands ached after long days. She began keeping lotion in every room, chapstick in every pocket. Little ways to hold herself together. The Carmichaels added more help, a weekly maid, a gardener, a personal chef who came twice a week. Jane got involved with a nonprofit. Robert traveled more. Ava entered middle school. The girls' world expanded, and Elisa's world shrank into the spaces no one else wanted to handle. Homework. Routines. Bra fittings. School tears. "You're the only one who gets me," Ava whispered one night, curled up on Elisa's lap, now almost too tall to fit. But that closeness became Jane's growing discomfort. She once pulled Elise aside in the kitchen. "I need to ask you to step back a little. Ava's becoming too reliant on you. She needs boundaries." Elise nodded, but her chest caved inward. What Jane meant was clear: Ava was getting older. And Elise was supposed to fade. One morning, Elise woke up to the sound of the housekeeper vacuuming. Ava had already left for school. She checked her phone. Nothing. No text from Jane. No update about the morning schedule. When she entered the kitchen, Jane looked up briefly from her yogurt bowl. "Oh, Elise. I assumed you were off today. No one told me." Jane shrugged. "Well, you don't have much to do today. Feel free to take some personal time." It sounded generous. But Elise had been around long enough to know what it really was: erasure in progress. She started saying no. No to extra errands. No to late-night airport pickups. No to staying behind while the family vacationed. She used to say yes to everything. Not anymore. Jane noticed. Robert grew colder. Ava, now a teenager, didn't. Not at first. But when Ava turned 16, Elise baked her favorite red velvet cake and set it in the kitchen. Jane had already ordered a designer cake. Ava thanked her mother politely and hugged Elise more tightly. Jane looked away. "You spoil her," she told Elise later. "I show up," Elise replied. And then came the boyfriend. When Ava brought home Julian, sweet smile, two smooth words, Elise felt the ground shift. Ava spent hours on the phone, stopped coming into Elise's room for advice, rolled her eyes more often. Normal teenage things. But Elise felt it like a withdrawal. She missed her. Jane, however, felt triumphant. "It's healthy for her to have other attachments," she said over coffee. "This is why you can't get too close. They leave." Elise wanted to say, "She's not leaving. She's growing." But the words felt childish. So she swallowed them. The summer before college, Ava began talking about moving out of state. Julian got into the same university. "Isn't that perfect?" Elise nodded. Jane clapped her hands. "Oh, she's flying, Elise. Our little bird. And you, dear, must be so relieved. A break at last." Elise smiled. But later that night, she stared at the ceiling for hours. Because relief was the last thing she felt. She felt abandoned. Again. A few weeks later, Jane came home from her sister's house and handed Elise an envelope. "Ava's rehearsal dinner is next month. Formal dress code. Staff will be seated separately. Just so there's no confusion." There it was. The line. Not just drawn. Cemented. Elise read the invitation. It said family dinner. No name. No role. just a date. A location. And an invisible stamp across the envelope. Not one of us. She almost didn't go. But Ava texted her the night before. Lissy, I can't do this without you. Promise you'll come. And so, she did. Hair pulled back. Dress modest. Hands folded in her lap. Aunt Carol gave her a kind smile. Uncle Nathan said, "Good to see you again, sweetheart." Jane avoided eye contact. Robert nodded once. Ava ran to her, held her hand. But when it came time to be seated, Elise found her name at the table near the buffet. The vendor table. Next to the photographer's assistant and the woman who handled the linens. Ava looked confused. "Why aren't you at the front?" Elise smiled tightly. "It's fine, honey. It's just one dinner." But inside, she knew. It wasn't just dinner. It was her place, made visible. And for the first time in 8 years, Elise realized how far she was from being seen. She went home that night and pulled out a small box from the back of her closet. Inside were photographs, some of Ava's early birthdays, cards with scribbled notes, a locket she never wore. Elise sat on her bed and spread the memories across the blanket. So many pieces of someone else's life. She held the locket in her palm. It was from Ava's 4th Christmas. Inside, a picture of Ava and Elise cheek to cheek. On the back, etched in Ava's tiny writing, "My favorite smile." She clutched it until her fingers ached. Because even if the world refused to call her family, someone had, once. Elise stood frozen on the cobblestone path, Ava's tiny hand still clutched in hers. The world around them had faded. Champagne glasses clinked in the background, violins hummed a romantic tune, and guests chattered beneath the fairy-lit canopy, but Elise could only hear one thing. "Mommy," Ava had said. Not Nanny. Not Elise. Mommy. And Jane had heard it. The bride's smile faltered just long enough for Elise to notice. A blink too slow. A twitch at the corner of her lips. Her fingers, wrapped around the stem of a champagne flute, gripped just a bit tighter. Ryan, the groom, chuckled uneasily. "Kids say the darndest things, huh?" he said to the crowd, trying to laugh it off. Ava's been surrounded by so much love. But Ava, unaware of the storm she had stirred, tugged again at Elise's hand. "Mommy, I'm sleepy. Can I go nap now?" That was when the silence deepened. The guests looked around, some awkwardly sipping their drinks, others whispering behind manicured hands. Jane's eyes locked on Elise, not as a friend, not even as a woman she once trusted with her child, but as a threat. Elise bent down, gently brushing Ava's hair behind her ear. "Let's find somewhere quiet, baby," she said softly, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. Ryan took a step forward. "I'll help." Jane held up her hand. "I think I can handle putting my daughter to sleep," she said flatly. The word might hit Elise like a slap. But Elise had learned long ago to swallow feelings whole. She gave a tight smile and nodded. "Of course. Ava, go with your mom." Ava hesitated. Her small face scrunched in confusion. "But I want Mommy, Elise." Whispers erupted like static. Jane's lips tightened. "Now, Ava." Reluctantly, Ava let go of Elise's hand. Jane scooped her up, smiling brightly for the cameras now trained on them, and walked away. Ava kept turning her head to look back at Elise until they disappeared behind the white lattice gate. Elise stood alone. She didn't return to the guest tables. She wandered past the hydrangeas and peonies toward the garden's far edge, where string lights stopped and shadows began. She sat on a stone bench beneath an old oak tree. Her hands trembled as she stared at them. What had she done wrong? Where had she crossed the line? She never taught Ava to call her mommy. She had been careful, so careful. But love doesn't follow rules. And Ava had given her heart away freely. Elise. Ryan's voice broke through the night air. She looked up to find him alone, his jacket now unbuttoned, bow tie askew. I told her not to overreact, he said, sitting beside her. I didn't mean for her to call me that, Elise said quickly. I never told her to. I swear. I know. He rubbed the back of his neck. But, maybe it's true. Elise blinked. What is? That you've been more of a mother to her than either of us have. The words shouldn't have comforted her. But they did. And they broke her heart. Ryan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Jane, she's always had one foot out the door. You saw it. Her job, the travel, the missed birthdays, the forgotten dentist appointments. And you were always there. I was paid to be. Ryan turned to her sharply. No. You were paid to babysit. Not to sleep by her bed when she had night terrors. Not to teach her piano because Jane didn't want lessons, cluttering the living room. Not to memorize her lullabies, her allergies, her favorite bedtime stories. That wasn't in your job description. Elise looked away. But it's not enough. I'm not enough. I'm still just the babysitter. He said it like a curse. Ryan stood. You're not. You never were. And if Jane can't see that, it's because she doesn't want to. Elise rose slowly. But she's her mother. And I'm nothing in the eyes of the law. He looked at her then, really looked. You're everything in the eyes of that little girl. A tear slid down Elise's cheek. I didn't want this. I didn't want it to become complicated. I loved her. That's all. Ryan's expression softened. And that's what makes it complicated. The wedding party went on, but Elise didn't return. She quietly left through the garden gate and walked the 2 miles back to the small apartment above the garage where she lived. She lay awake that night, Ava's voice echoing in her mind. Mommy. By morning, there was a message from Jane. Elise. Please take a few days off. We need to reevaluate some things. Ryan will cover Ava's care. Short. Cold. Final. Elise didn't reply. She packed her essentials into a weekend bag and left for a quiet inn by the lake. She needed to think. To breathe. To cry where no one could hear her. 3 days passed. On the 4th, her phone buzzed at dawn. It was Ryan. She's been crying for you non-stop. Another message followed. She won't eat. She keeps asking why Mommy Elise isn't home. Elise's heart cracked all over again. But she didn't respond. She couldn't. Not yet. By the 6th day, Ryan sent a voice note. Elise, it's Ava. I miss you. Mommy said you don't work here now. Did I do something wrong? I'm sorry, Mommy Elise. I'll be good. Please come back. Elise pressed the phone to her chest and sobbed. She didn't know what the right decision was. She wasn't Ava's mother. But she wasn't nothing either. She returned on the 7th day. Not to stay. Just to talk. She stood at the doorstep, the same house where she had braided Ava's hair, bandaged scraped knees, folded laundry, sung lullabies. And now, she felt like a ghost in her own story. Jane opened the door. Her eyes were red-rimmed but guarded. We need to talk, Elise said calmly. I agree. Jane stepped aside. They sat across from each other in the living room, where stuffed animals peeked out from under cushions. You crossed a boundary, Jane said, whether you meant to or not. I know, Elise whispered. But Ava crossed it first. I just followed. Jane's eyes shimmered, but her voice was flat. I'm her mother. Yes. But I'm someone too. There it was. The quiet war they had waged for years now laid bare. Not over money or status, but over love. Over a child. I'm not asking to replace you, Elise continued. I'm just asking not to be erased. Jane didn't reply. But later that evening, Ava opened the door to Elise's room. Her face lit up. You came back. Elise knelt. Only if that's okay. Ava wrapped her arms around her neck. You're my mommy too. Elise held her tightly, whispering through tears, I'll always be here for you. Even if the world didn't have a title for what she was. Ava already had one. Elise stared at the ceiling of her tiny studio apartment, the hum of the fridge the only sound filling the silence. The morning sun filtered through the blinds, casting lines across the floor like bars. She hadn't slept. Not really. Her mind kept replaying that final moment at the door, Ava's small arms reaching for her, Jane's firm grip pulling her back, and Ryan saying nothing at all. That was what hurt most. The silence. The text messages had stopped after the first day. Elise had tried. She sent one asking how Ava was, another to say she left her hairbrush behind. No response. Not even a read receipt. Eventually, she stopped checking. Eventually, she told herself to stop hoping. But the ache in her chest told a different story. The babysitting gigs that followed weren't the same. No one clung to her legs when she left. No one made her handmade bracelets with cheap beads and misspelled names. She missed Ava's voice singing off-key Disney songs in the back seat, her morning hugs that smelled like syrup and apples, the way she whispered, "Don't forget me," every time Elise dropped her off at school. It wasn't just a job. It had never been just a job. But maybe that was her mistake. Maybe she let herself believe she belonged in a family that was never hers. A few weeks passed. Elise was walking home from the grocery store, a single bag of essentials slung over her shoulder, when her phone buzzed. Unknown number, she talks about you every day. Her heart jumped. She paused on the sidewalk, hands trembling as she stared at the message. The number wasn't saved, but she knew. She knew. It had to be Ryan. Another message popped in. Unknown number, she misses you. Badly. Elise didn't reply. She couldn't trust it. Not yet. Not when they'd cast her aside so easily. But her hand didn't stop shaking until long after she got home. That night, she sat on her couch with her knees pulled to her chest, reading the messages over and over. What did they mean? What did he want? And why now? Ryan was a mess. He sat in the living room of their pristine, too quiet house, scrolling through photos on his phone. Ava in her unicorn pajamas, Elise reading to her with exaggerated voices, the three of them at the park, him holding the camera, Elise holding Ava. His throat tightened. She asked if Elise was on vacation again, he said aloud, not really talking to anyone. Jane looked up from her tablet. She'll forget her eventually. Ryan stared at her, disbelief on his face. Forget her? Are you serious? Elise was in her life every day for 4 years. She taught her how to tie her shoes. She held her through the night when she had the flu. She knows Ava better than either of us do. Jane raised an eyebrow. She was the babysitter, Ryan. We needed to draw a line. He shook his head slowly. You drew a line. I just didn't erase it fast enough. Jane scoffed and returned to her tablet. Elisa's phone buzzed again a few days later. Ryan, she made you a card. She says it's for when you come back. Elise swallowed. This wasn't fair. This wasn't her decision. They'd made it for her. Now they wanted to act like it had all been a misunderstanding. Ryan, I should have stopped her. Ryan, I should have told her you were family. Ryan, I'm sorry, Elise. The last message sat there like a stone. Heavy. Unmoving. She didn't reply. But she cried. At Ava's school, the teacher called Jane in one afternoon. "She's been quiet lately," Ms. Reyes said gently. "Withdrawn. She doesn't talk as much in class. She doesn't play with the others at recess. When I ask if something's wrong, she just shrugs." Jane folded her arms. "She's adjusting. There's nothing wrong." Ms. Reyes hesitated, then reached into her drawer. She drew this during art time. It was a picture of a tall woman with curly hair, holding hands with a little girl in a yellow dress. Above them, in big block letters, were the words, "I miss you, Lise." Jane's face tightened. "We've explained to her that Elise has moved on." Ms. Reyes nodded. "I understand. But I thought you should know how deeply she feels it. Kids, they don't understand boundaries the way we do. To them, love is love." Elise stood at the edge of the park, unsure why she had come. The sun was beginning to dip, and laughter rang out from the playground. She spotted them quickly, Ryan on a bench, looking like he hadn't slept, and Ava in her favorite yellow dress, swinging half-heartedly. Ryan saw her and stood. His expression was unsure, hopeful, afraid. Ava saw her next. Her eyes lit up like fireworks. "Lise," she screamed, jumping off the swing and running at full speed. Elise dropped to her knees just in time to catch her. They clung to each other for what felt like forever. Ava sobbed, hiccuped, babbled all at once. "I made you cards. I drew pictures. I told Daddy to call you but he said we couldn't. Why couldn't we? Why did you go? Don't go again, please don't go again." Elise kissed her head, holding her tight. "I missed you too, baby. So much." Ryan stepped forward, eyes glassy. "I know I don't deserve it, but, thank you for coming." Elise looked at him over Ava's head. "I didn't come for you." He nodded. "I know." They sat on the bench in silence while Ava played. "She still has your bracelet," he said quietly. "She wears it to sleep." Elise smiled faintly. "I messed up. You let your wife treat me like a stranger. And you let her teach Ava that love has limits." He nodded slowly. "I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't erase 4 years." He looked down. "I know." Ava ran back, cheeks flushed. She thrust a crumpled piece of paper into Elise's hand. It was a drawing. Elise. Ava. And a big red heart between them. "It means love doesn't stop," Ava whispered. Elise kissed her forehead, blinking back tears. "You're absolutely right." Elise didn't move back in. She didn't ask for her job back. But from that day on, she and Ava met every Saturday. Sometimes at the park. Sometimes over pancakes. Sometimes just sitting together in silence. It wasn't what it was before. But it was real. And for once, that was enough. Ava's laughter echoed across the quiet house, bouncing off the walls like sunlight streaming through a storm. Elise stood at the doorway to the playroom, watching the little girl build towers with blocks. Ava glanced up and grinned, her smile bright and innocent. "Elise, look. It's a castle for us. You live here with me now, okay?" Elise's throat tightened. If only it were that simple. She walked into the room, knelt down beside her, and gently touched one of the blocks. "That's beautiful, sweetheart. But I won't be living here much longer." Ava's hand froze midair. "Why?" Her voice was soft, afraid. Elise took a deep breath. She had rehearsed this moment for days, but no version of the speech ever felt right. "Because your mommy and daddy want to spend more time with you. They think it's best." "But you're my best friend," Ava whispered. Elise's eyes stung. And you'll always be mine. Jane stood in the kitchen later that evening, pouring herself a glass of wine. Ryan leaned against the island, arms crossed. She's really leaving this time, he said. Jane nodded, nonchalant. It's for the best. For whom? Ryan's voice was rough. Jane paused, then set her glass down. You're still holding on to something that was never yours. She was a nanny, Ryan. Not family. She raised Ava. She was there when you weren't. Because that was her job. And now it's done. Ryan looked away, his jaw tightening. You don't even see it, do you? Ava loves her like a second mother. She'll get over it. Children always do. The morning of Elise's departure was gray and quiet. Her suitcase sat by the door, zipped and worn. She moved around the guest room, folding the last of her clothes, running a finger along the dresser she had once organized with tiny socks and bedtime books. A knock came. Elise turned. Ryan stood in the doorway, his shirt rumpled, dark circles under his eyes. You sure you won't stay? Elise forced a smile. There's nothing left for me to stay for. He took a step in. I should have protected you better. All these years. I knew. I saw how Jane treated you. I let it happen. Yes, you did. And I stayed because of Ava. Because I thought, she shook her head. It doesn't matter now. It matters to me. Elise looked at him, eyes unreadable. You had years, Ryan. What you're feeling now is regret. But it's not love. He said nothing. He knew she was right. Downstairs, Jane sat on the couch with Ava, brushing the child's hair with a distracted rhythm. Elise entered the room quietly, her suitcase wheels barely making a sound. Ava's eyes lit up. You're not really going, are you? Ava asked. Jane stiffened. Elise crouched in front of Ava. Sweetheart, I have to. But I want you to always remember something, okay? Ava nodded, lips trembling. You are the most magical little girl I've ever known. Brave, kind, smart, and full of sunshine. Never let anyone make you feel like you're not enough. Ava threw her arms around Elise's neck. Elise held her tightly, memorizing the feel of those tiny arms, the scent of strawberries in her hair. Jane cleared her throat. Ava, say goodbye now. Elise has to go. Elise pulled back slowly, brushing a tear off Ava's cheek. Goodbye, baby girl. I love you. Ava's voice cracked. I love you more. The ride to the station was silent. Ryan had insisted on driving her, even though she hadn't asked. Elise stared out the window, the familiar streets blurring with emotion. As he parked, he turned to her. If you ever need anything. She cut him off gently. Take care of Ava. That's all I need. He looked down. She'll miss you. We both will. Elise nodded. Then don't let her grow up in silence. Make sure she always knows she's loved. She stepped out of the car. Her boots hit the pavement with finality. She walked away without looking back. A month passed. Autumn leaves danced across the sidewalks. In a quiet little town 2 hours away, Elise unlocked the door to a small apartment. The scent of fresh paint and lavender filled the air. It wasn't much, but it was hers. She had started working at a children's center, teaching music and movement to toddlers. Her laughter returned, slowly. Her nights became peaceful. Her heart, though still bruised, began to heal. One day after class, she found a drawing tucked inside her bag. A stick figure with curly hair stood beside a little girl with big round eyes. Above them, in a child's scribble, were the words, "Best friends forever." Ava. Tears welled up in Elise's eyes. That night, she wrote a letter and tucked it into the post. To Ava. I got your picture today. It's beautiful. I hung it on my wall so I can see it every day. I miss you more than words can say, but I'm so proud of you. Always be kind. Always be strong. And always remember how much you are loved. Love, Elise. Back in the big house, Ava stood at the mailbox with Ryan, holding Elise's letter like it was a treasure. She didn't understand everything that had happened, but she knew one thing. Love doesn't disappear just because someone leaves. And she would never forget the woman who taught her that. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful narratives that remind us how deeply people can shape our lives. Have you ever felt invisible in a place you called home? Drop your story in the comments, we're listening.